Hello, I'm Joanne Gallagher, your Think Future podcast host. Zoe Green joins the programme today from WSP in New Zealand to talk about the benefits of sponge cities to build water resilience in urban areas, serving as a risk mitigation solution at city scale. This podcast is brought to you by Arcons, a global leader pioneering solutions and services to the construction and manufacturing industries to support digital transformation for the built environment and smart manufacturing. Visit arcons.world to learn more about how Arcons are helping organizations design, build, and solve through digitalization. From Arcons to you, welcome to our Think Future podcast series. Each week, we'll share conversations with industry leaders from around the world to find out how they're thinking future. Subscribe to Arcons Think Future to access more episodes, interviews, and profiles. Zoe Green leads on cities for WSP Aotearoa New Zealand's strategic advisory business. She has around 18 years of experience in guiding clients through change from strategy development through to project delivery in the built environment. Zoe has a strong background in sustainability, urban planning, scenario planning, and analytics. She has worked closely with government, private sector, and multilateral organizations across 20 countries, providing strategic and spatial planning advice on urban, economic, and sustainable development, with a strong focus on environmental, social, and governance factors. Hello, welcome to the programme, Zoe.
Kia ora, Joanne. Lovely to be with you today.
Yes, it is. Zoe, please tell us a little bit about your academic background, experience, and understanding of the government approaches towards design of cities with water management in mind.
So I'm Zoe Green. I'm an associate director in the strategic advisory business at WSP. My background's in urban planning, which is what I trained in originally. I spent most of my career working in London, but I've worked across sort of 20 different countries in terms of master planning, everything from kind of neighborhood level right up to kind of countrywide development and sustainability type strategies. A lot of the work I've been doing over the course of my career has been working with national and local governments, and very much around the area of how we improve our cities, how we kind of drive more sustainable outcomes for places. And a particular project, just to give you an example of the sort of work, was when I did some work with EBRD, which is the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And they were running a Green Cities program, which they were working with different countries across Eastern Europe and looking at ways that they could improve the kind of blue-green networks within those cities to promote more sustainable transportation options, but also to kind of make their cities healthier, more sustainable places in terms of greening, but also tackling big issues such as water.
Okay, and what does managing water then as an urban planner mean to you?
To put it in a sort of kind of concept, you can think of it as a kind of a water is like a lifeblood. You know, we see sort of blood circulating through the human body, sort of water flows through the veins of a city. It's really about how water sustains life within a place, how we can then work with water to actually support more biodiversity in the places that we live, how we enable our cities to thrive appropriately.
So the water publication the World Green Building Council put out last November, I asked you if you take a wee look at that and see what you think and expand on the role of water in the built environment. What did you think of that document, and did you see any parallels with your work?
Absolutely. So that document was very good at surmising the kind of the key critical issues within water. So we've got things like water scarcity, we've got water equity, access and quality, greenhouse gas emissions, and obviously resilience and climate change. And one of the stats that really stuck out from that report was the one which said that 90% of natural disasters are water related. And obviously that is to do with the kind of the increase in extreme weather events, with climate change, and actually how our cities and towns are becoming more at risk, and people are being put in more vulnerable locations.
Yeah, we can go into that in a bit more detail later on, maybe as you talk about sponge cities. In the meantime, I was wondering, what the current water situation is in New Zealand where you live?
Yes, flooding is one of our most common natural hazards in New Zealand. We have a significant flooding event every 8 months, which is really frequent. Um, and our research report, Sponge Cities, which we did with the Helen Clark Foundation, which is an independent think tank, the research that we uncovered from that really honed in on how critical issues like flooding are becoming in New Zealand, and actually how our cities and towns are getting more vulnerable, and actually how we should be looking at more innovative ways to tackle some of these challenges, taking in sort of nature-based solution approaches and looking beyond the traditional fixing the pipes or the grey infrastructure, and actually looking at how we can kind of bed more environmental practices within the ways that we manage the sort of influx of water from these significant events.
Could you, for the audience who may not know what a sponge city means, could you define what they are and how it brings nature into the solution?
Absolutely. So Sponge Cities is all about working with water rather than against it. It's about absorbing, storing, and slowly releasing stormwater into our environment. And some of the approaches that you can think about using that are things like daylighting streams. So that means, removing the concrete on sort of hidden streams and actually exposing them to daylight. Also looking at things like enhancing green spaces to become more absorbent, using green infrastructure like trees, swales, rain gardens, and green roofs, etc. In terms of the scale of doing these activities, typically in New Zealand and a lot of places, other places, we see really good examples at the kind of the local and neighbourhood level. But actually, when you start to scale these levels to kind of the precinct or city level, we get fewer examples. And within the New Zealand context, when we're looking to kind of improve our resilience to water in cities, having that larger scale approach to managing the issue is really, really important.
So in New Zealand, do you have an example that you think is big enough for a city level at scale to talk about today that you've worked on?
Okay. An example of sponge cities in practice in New Zealand is Green Slade Reserve, which is in a sort of a community area of Northcote in Auckland. And to set the scene, we had some really significant flooding events in January 2023, where we had loss of life, we had significant levels of damage to the city, and a lot of homes were having to be evacuated, etc. We were very fortunate with Green Slade Reserve. It had actually just been finished in terms of the Sponge City interventions that had been done on that particular location. And this involved basically daylighting the stream for that part of that site, but also the reserve itself was transformed into a stormwater detention park. And this basically involved a playing field was lowered by 1 metre, and then it was underlaid with sort of quick fill, like draining material. And so when the big event struck that location, the site managed to absorb 12 million litres of water during a 15-hour period, and it basically stopped the water from flooding all the surrounding houses. So it was a real significant win in terms of actually having that kind of location developed to take the pressure off and actually reduce risk to property and to people's lives.
Sounds really good. We'll be back to the conversation in just a minute. In the meantime, here's a little bit more about Arcons. Arcons has a mission to advance the efficiency, quality and profitability of project outcomes for its customers, providing best-in-class technology augmented by its in-house developed IP and a full suite of professional services. Arcons is trusted by over 40,000 customers globally. If you're looking for a digitalization and sustainability-focused partner to help you achieve your goals, join the thousands of construction and manufacturing customers globally who choose Arcons as their digitalization partner. With more than 50 locations around the world, Arcons can connect you to the right technologies and expertise so you can improve your competitive position and increase profitability. Archons has an industry expert to help you navigate the best pathway forward wherever you are on your digitalization and sustainability journey. Visit archons.world to find out more. And now back to our conversation. Do you have any idea of the economic benefit of having that solution there compared to other events in New Zealand where you didn't have that? Does that make sense?
So in our Sponge Cities report, our research indicated that the nature-based solutions, such as the Greenslade example, can actually be 50% more economical and 28% more effective compared to traditional methods of using grey infrastructure. So what's really interesting about the way we incorporate this is that it can actually have significant savings. Often nature-based solutions in this context can be seen as a nice to have or a design feature, but actually framing nature-based solutions or water sensitive design can actually be really beneficial in terms of being more economical, increase resilience, and be more beneficial for our cities and towns.
So, in that sense, what sort of decision making scenarios can be thought through using this holistic whole systems approach to water resilience?
So, when we think about using a whole systems approach, I think there's three areas to consider here. So, one is taking a kind of a longer term view around a space or a location. And this is really to sort of think about actually how climate will be changing in that location, how we should be adapting our locations in terms of urban adaptation, or looking at ways that we can kind of reduce risks to those locations as well. The second area we can look at is also nature-based solutions. So this is about looking at how we can implement things like wetlands or green roofs or permeable surfaces that can only manage water more sustainably, but they also provide additional benefits. We get improvements in air quality, enhanced biodiversity, and obviously that reduction in risk overall. And then the third one is the possibilities of looking at how we can kind of scale and get benefits of economies of scale. So this is looking at how we can kind of scale water resilience measures across larger areas where we can lead to significant cost savings. For example, looking at kind of regional rainwater harvesting systems or large scale green infrastructure projects. The larger the scale that we look at doing these interventions, the more cost effective, but also the greater protection that we can achieve from doing these measures.
Was at the World Green Building Leadership Summit there in June in London, and the topic of resilience came up, and everyone has a different definition of resilience. How would you define resilience in this case?
Well, I think water's seen as a very complex issue. It's something that is a global issue, but I think in terms of the resilience of a place, it's about improving the livability of a location and really looking at how we can actually work with water rather than against water. So within the way we look at it in New Zealand, Mataranga Maori is a really important aspect to this. So this is really thinking about the kind of the traditional knowledge and wisdom within our kind of society, and looking at the linkages with how we sort of view environment. It's something that we want to work with rather than force a kind of a change. And so when we look at that, we think about sort of recognizing the flow of water, its needs, its energy, its Maori, which is the kind of life energy as a simple translation. And this is really recognizing that the way we live in an environment, we need to be thinking about it as a whole and doing the best we can for it.
Of course, the local knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, is thousands of years old. So they know the land through all kinds of change and how water would move. Is that correct? So they would understand better.
Absolutely. And I think the interesting thing here is as well the kind of the long-term view they take around the understanding. So when they look at sort of future plans or how an environment may be shaped, they tend to look, 100, 200 years into the future. And often we see with our own kind of city level or local level strategies, we may look 15, 20 years into the future. but actually applying a slightly longer term view to these issues, I think we can kind of have a greater appreciation of how we can um, share the intergenerational benefits, but and also reduce the risks to future generations as well. It's really about taking that wider view.
So combining the knowledge and ancient wisdom from the local people and combining it with technology. How are you using technology or design in this environment?
I think technology is definitely an enabler. It's something which we're going to see when we look into towards future trends, that we will get better at kind of identifying risks. We'll be able to monitor things more carefully in terms of sort of changing patterns and areas that are more prone and at risk. So there's definitely some benefits around giving us better data around that. I think in terms of other technological innovations.
Zoe, do you think that digital twin technology can be used to design for better water resilience?
Absolutely. So digital twins are being used globally at the moment, and they're becoming used across all different types of sector. I think there's definitely application within the water management sector in terms of, integrating sort of real-time data from sensors placed in water systems, to continually using things like predictive data and measures to improve the understanding of when things needed to be upgraded or enhanced, or linking it to wider scenario planning. The more information that we can put into these, the more better outcomes we'll get in terms of helping to predict and plan where things need to go, where they need to be upgraded, and how to develop more robust and resilient water management strategies.
So, have you seen any water sensitive design sponge cities examples overseas that you'd like to talk about?
We when we were doing our Sponge Cities research report, we focused in on Singapore as an interesting case study to look at around this issue. Mainly because the average monthly rainfall in Singapore is twice of Auckland, and they also experienced some really significant flooding events back in 2010 and 2011. And a result of those events was that the government then decided to do a big program around improving blue-green infrastructure within the location, involving a lot of daylighting of rivers, resurfacing naturalized river channels, planting trees alongside rivers to absorb and filter runoff. And actually, through those measures that they did, when they measured it all, they saw that they reduced their kind of flood-prone land from around 3,200 hectares to 30 hectares, which is a significant improvement. And whilst they still do have major flooding events like monsoons, etc., because of the measures that they've introduced, the extreme level of water goes down in about an hour, which is really great in terms of making sure that the city can operate and actually reducing the impact on such events on the city. So looking at global examples like that, it's very inspirational for other cities and towns to kind of see that actually such interventions can have a real significant impact.
So, we're talking about interventions like after the infrastructure's in place, we retrofit back to the challenge to solve the problem of the water. But what about where they have not developed yet? Are there any advice for planners in understanding the nature of water in those areas?
So where they haven't done,
Where they haven't put any, infrastructure in, any people living there, but they want to develop it. So I'm just thinking about the future of planning.
so I think with water, the way that we need to tackle it in the future is to really integrate it across the way that we plan our towns and cities. It's not a single issue. It's not something that can be thought about in isolation. It links to everything that goes on in our cities. Everything, if we're doing new transport projects, etc., we need to think about how the routes of water, flood-prone areas, how locations get water, where water goes, etc. I think that it's really critical that water is treated as, as I said before, the kind of the lifeblood of the city, where we need to respect how it flows in and out of our cities, respect that some places may become more watery in the future, as long as we understand how it moves around and how we get it from one location to the other. I think from a planning point of view, a holistic approach to how we think about that integrated with other areas is really important.
So moving off a little bit off the topic of sponge cities to just infrastructure in general, how is the infrastructure holding up in New Zealand, like the dams and the weirs and the canals, when it comes to having to upgrade them and so on?
So at the moment, we are in a position where we've got significant aging infrastructure. I think we at the moment get about a quarter of the investment we need in infrastructure. And there really needs to be an increased focus around how we can continue to upgrade and improve the resilience of our cities and towns. I think as well that this has to be a kind of a cross-party issue. Often when we see kind of short-term political cycles, we might not always get a long-term solution around dealing with significant infrastructure deficits. So actually, there does need to be more backing across all the parties about really focusing in on this issue and looking at ways that we can innovate beyond the traditional grey infrastructure, and actually how we can incorporate more green infrastructure and blue infrastructure practices in how we work with water.
Sounds like the political parties need to have a visioning session with the Maori people.
Absolutely.
Long-term vision session. That's great. So as we close out today's conversation, when you think future about the potential of managing the design of water for water resilience in the built environment in New Zealand, what is it that excites you the most?
The most exciting aspect of managing and sort of designing for water resilience in the built environment is really the chance to fundamentally transform our interaction with water. So while water is often viewed as a complex issue, as I said earlier, I think if we look globally and also locally, we have got some great examples where we've used nature-based solutions or water-sensitive design that can really help to address this complexity and also decrease pressure on our existing aging infrastructure networks. These approaches not only help to kind of mitigate climate change impacts, but also contribute to greener, more vibrant communities.
I think that's sensible advice, because we need water and we got to learn to live with it. So thank you so much for your insights today, and look forward to seeing more examples of sponge cities in the world. Thank you, Zoe. This podcast was brought to you by Arcons. Arcons is leading the digital transformation of the construction and manufacturing industries, providing best-in-class technology solutions from world-leading partners and their own in-house development software from the Arcons BSmart portfolio for building, infrastructure and manufacturing, and a full suite of professional services. Arcons is a company that cares about creating and building a better world. Together we are working with industry and environmental experts, providing forums and platforms through our Arcons Think community to create conversations that matter to our future generations. We invite you to join in the conversation and participate in our Think community. Like and subscribe to our Think Future newsletter to stay up to date with the latest innovations and conversations as we advance the digital journey for construction and manufacturing around the world. You can download our podcasts at arcons.world or from your favorite podcast platform. From Arcons Think Future, thanks for listening.